If you wish to address the board regarding the public hearing for the draft environmental impact report for a high school in Castaic, please complete the request to address the board public comment welcome form and return it to the secretary of the board. Comments regarding the consent calendar will be taken during public comments. Please use the microphone. State your name and location of residence. And I'm going to limit you, or the board president will limit your comments to 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And we do have a clock down here, so it's no surprise. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Cole to please introduce this topic, public hearing to accept comments regarding the draft environmental impact report.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam President, Governing Board. Tonight, our project team has worked diligently to get us to this point, which is to have another great milestone to represent how this district has progressed on a Castaic area high school site. As recommended and encouraged by CEQA, tonight we will be conducting a public hearing on the draft environmental impact report for Castaic area high school. As most of you know, we circulated our draft environmental impact report on July 24th. It commenced our review and comment period, which is a 45-day review process. This 45-day review process will expire on September 6th. I have asked 2 team members this evening to join us relative to their areas of expertise and to give the board a brief presentation and explanation of what they have done thus far relative to this document. First with us this evening is Dwayne Mears, who is the principal at the Planning Center. Obviously, he is the district's environmental planning consultant. His office was tasked with producing this draft environmental impact report for Castaic area high school. Dwayne, would you mind giving the board and the public a brief update of what you've done thus far?
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Dwayne Mears. I'm a principal of the Planning Center, and of course we're the authors of the draft DEIR that's before you. But we have a very large team, and I want to recognize those people. It's really certainly not me, just me. It's a group of traffic engineers, civil engineers, biologists, archaeologists. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So it's a big team, a very great team. I think we work very well together, and they've put together various technical studies and, of course, the draft DEIR that you see before you tonight. What I'm going to cover, one is the status of the CEQA document, kind of where we've been and where we're heading from here, the conclusions of the draft DEIR, what did we find in our analysis, and then the next steps. What are the next steps after tonight that we're going to take? In terms of the CEQA process, Tom's already mentioned that the draft DEIR was out for public review 45 days, July 24 through September 6th, so everybody needs to get their comments in by September 6th to the district. Now, following the public review, we will prepare responses to comments, and so we'll take all of the environmental comments that we receive and provide written responses to those. We may organize it differently. If we have a lot of comments on one topic, we may kind of have a group answer to that, but we'll make sure that we've answered all the questions that come up. We're going to circulate a final EIR, which will include several things, including the responses to comments and a mitigation monitoring program and some other things. That will be circulated on September 21st. And we've got a certification hearing date set for October 3rd. And what's called a notice of determination is filed. If approved, a notice of determination is filed the day after October 4th, and that would end the CEQA process. Now, the draft EIR was circulated to a number of agencies and interested parties. Public agencies, especially the County of Los Angeles, Caltrans, others like that, a total of 17 public agencies, local agencies, 17 local agencies, 15 state agencies, and 8 organizations. They got the draft DEIR. We also sent out notices to all people who had submitted comments before. That was a total of 162 individuals got notices. They got the notice of availability saying where the documents are available and that you can find it online as well. And we published that same notice in the Daily News. The draft DEIR was made available at this office here, Valencia Public Library, Castaic Public Library, Stevenson Ranch Express Library, Sloan Canyon Christian Academy, and of course on the district's website. You can download it from there. Now it's a huge document, and if you looked at the appendices, it's even bigger. There's a lot of information, so I'm just going to give you the real highlights at this point. But when we look at environmental impacts, what we're really trying to do is determine whether the impact would be significant or not significant. And if it's significant, then we look for mitigation measures or alternatives, ways to minimize those impacts. So you always hear me talk about whether something is significant or not. We found that 50 of the categories that we look at, 50 of the environmental questions, were found to be less than significant. In other words, let's just take something like mineral resources. Well, we don't have mineral resources, so there's no impact, and so it's not significant. And so 50 of the categories were found to be less than significant. 12 categories were found to be less than significant, but that's after mitigation. So in other words, we found some significant impact, but we identified mitigation measures that would solve the issue and reduced it to a less than significant level. So that's 12 categories. Of most concern, we found 7 categories that were significant and unavoidable. So that's important in all of this, because if we find an impact significant and we can't mitigate it, it's unavoidable, then to approve the project, you have to go through another process and approve a statement of overriding considerations, for example, which balances the impacts against the benefits of the project. So 7 categories that were significant and unavoidable. Let me briefly just mention what those 7 are. One is substantially alter the existing visual character, nighttime lighting, air quality, specifically the construction emissions, and air quality in terms of exposure to sensitive receptors. And that's the traffic going near homes. Construction noise, and that's temporary, but still the construction is going to go on a while, and so we found that to be significant. And project-generated traffic. Next steps, when the public review closes, we're going to collect all of those comments, and they're coming in already by email and hard copy. We'll collect all of those, organize them by topic and by whether they're coming from a public or a private individual, and begin the process of responding to those comments. And I've already mentioned we will circulate a final EIR that will contain, it might contain an errata section, in other words, the kind of minor changes that we need to make. It will include everyone's comments, and it will include our written responses. And so that comes out September 21st. Board hearing then October 3rd. And at that board hearing, you'll first consider certifying the EIR. Is the EIR adequate in terms of its analysis of the project? There'll also be on the agenda a mitigation monitoring program that has to be approved if you move forward, a statement of overriding considerations. You'll consider approving the project itself, and finally consider authorizing the filing of the notice of determination. And that would be the next day. We would go to the county, file it with the county and the state, and that would conclude the CEQA process. And so that's my overview of where we are right now, and I'll turn it back to Tom.
Dwayne, thank you. Next up is Wendy Wiles. Wendy is going to obviously be a part of the legal clarity here relative to the draft environmental impact report. She has supported this district throughout the course of this project history. So without further ado, here's Wendy Wiles.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. As you have seen by looking at the draft environmental impact report for the Castaic High School project, and as Mr. Mears has said, it is a very large, detailed document. And the purpose behind CEQA is to make sure that any project does thoroughly analyze in detail the potential environmental effects and then ways to mitigate those effects. And as Mr. Mears has indicated, it's those effects which are really critical. And so what the process that is really beginning now is the process for the board to begin considering this project in light of the draft environmental impact report and the public comments that are received. Tonight you are holding a public hearing which allows the public the opportunity to come before you as the lead agency on this project and hear their comments as it relates to the project and potential environmental issues which they think need to be addressed or concerns that they might have with regard to the project or the draft EIR as it is currently presented. Now, first I should say that a public hearing is not required under CEQA. This board has indicated a desire to make sure that there is public participation, which is encouraged under the California Environmental Quality Act. And so this process tonight of allowing a public hearing, although not required, really aids in the ability of the board as lead agency to understand the public comments as they might be made tonight. As Mr. Mears has mentioned, all written comments, really all environmental comments, will be responded to and presented again to the board and the public. This is not the time for debating. If there's a disagreement on what is in the EIR or a disagreement with what might be said by the public, this is not the time to respond to the comments that are received tonight as part of the public hearing. But certainly if any board member had a question about a comment, something that you didn't understand, it's appropriate, of course, to ask for clarification. But really the response time will come once the public comment period has been completed, as Mr. Mears has indicated. Then the formal response will be presented on all of those comments, and draft responses will be released so that the board, as lead agencies, will have a chance to see those documents as well. What really comes next is really the board's responsibility. So the board, as lead agency, is required to independently review this document and really determine on its own independent judgment the validity and decision-making process of whether to move forward or not with this project. As Mr. Mears has mentioned, the board, when it considers this project, will be looking at the mitigation measures to be able to mitigate the environmental effects of the proposed project. It will also be looking at the mitigation monitoring program, so you will have what is proposed to mitigate the environmental effects in front of you for you to consider. And then, because there are significant unavoidable effects identified already, the board will be asked to adopt a statement of overriding considerations if you move forward with this project. So the board's work is coming, and the hearing on October 3rd will be the hearing to consider the certification of the EIR, to consider how those environmental effects have been responded to, how the proposed project effects have been mitigated, and then ultimately a decision to be made as to whether the board certifies the EIR and then adopts and approves the project. And that's where we are tonight. Glad to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions at this point? Yes, Mr. Sturgis?
Are comments made by the public tonight recorded as part of the document, or do they have to submit it in writing in order to be included?
And you can respond to that.
I will be taking very detailed notes. And I would encourage people to submit any comments in writing, but I will be taking detailed notes, and so we will respond to comments that are made tonight.
I'm similarly
In
taking
writing,
notes.
you're going to respond in writing back?
Yes.
Oh.
As part of the response to comments in the final EIR, we will have a section that covers comments that are made tonight.
Okay. But it should be noted that should you miss something, it's not your fault. It's the public responsibility to make their notes or their comments in writing to assure themselves.
I certainly would encourage it, yes.
All right. The board now opens the public hearing to accept comments regarding the draft environmental impact report for a high school site in Castaic. Have any written comments been received by the district as to the draft environmental impact report, Mr. Cole?
Yes, written comments have been received thus far.
All right. If you wish to provide oral comments on the draft environmental impact report and have not already completed a speaker card, please do so now. And now, please come forward when your name is called and address your comments to the board. And as I've stated before, there's a clock down below somewhere there. Okay, all right. So our first speaker will be Mr. Lance Vaughn. Please step up to the podium.
Hello, my name is Lance Vaughn. I've been in Castaic for about 16 years. I'm on the Castaic Education Foundation. I'm also a Castaic Man of the Year. And my son is now a 10th grader at Valencia. He is, when he was in the first grade, we were promised a high school, and we all know how that's gone. When hopefully you do put in the high school, please put in 2 access roads. If you are a resident of Castaic, you know the traffic nightmares that occur there. When the I-5 is closed due to snow in Gorman, the place is a parking lot. Plus, as many of you might not know, 2/3 of the students will be coming from south of where the high school is. And the access road at the top of Hillcrest Park or all the way down into, around the 126. That way, Val Verde, Live Oak, Hillcrest Park will all have access to the high school without trying to go through the old road, which is not a road that is adequate to equip that much traffic. And you know, it's been a parking lot anyway. And with that road all the way through, like I said, kids can ride their bikes, get to the school there on time. Also, the staff will be able to have a second access to get to the school. Not everybody will be living in Castaic. Your staff will be coming from Valencia, from out of town, to get there. When the freeway is closed or the nightmare, your staff will not show up on time. Sometimes it's taken my son and I an hour to get to the middle school, and we live 2 miles away from the middle school. So I encourage you to please have the school done on time and build 2 access. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mrs. Jean Cloyd.
Good evening. I'm going to bring this up here. West Ranch High School took over 5 years to build. West Ranch High School has been operating for 9 years. The West Ranch Stevenson Ranch community is still waiting for a promised secondary access. There is not one member of those communities that like their one-way in and out, high school and middle school. You have an opportunity to implement dual access to the north and a south access to Hillcrest on the opening day of school for the Castaic students and community with no interruption of existing traffic conditions. This is what the community is asking for. This is what the community voted for. We need our high school and middle school connected for student safety and community convenience. No matter which site you choose, the hybrid site or the Hasley Sloan site, dual access on opening day is what the community wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Tricia Howell.
Hello, good evening. I'm Tricia Howell. I live on Sloan Canyon for 30 years. As everyone knows, I'm a professional cowgirl. I live on a ranch. I have 14 acres. I'd like to keep my area rural. I would like you to consider opening the gate on Romero Canyon. There's a bridge available at Romero Canyon, and Romero is mostly urban. It has, I don't know how many houses, maybe 100, maybe 200 houses, and very little livestock. It is mostly paved, halfway paved, plus the bridge. It could be accessed through Hasley, through the Commerce Center, and off of the 126. And if you do choose Sloan Canyon Road, it's mostly private now, so you would need to assume responsibility for it. And it's been downgraded to a local collector street per the One Valley, One Vision. So that would be 2 lanes, which is 65 feet, which also calls for ranch lighting, low lighting, less pavement, all part of the One Valley, One Vision. There's also in the One Valley, One Vision, there's a prior planning effort for conservation and open space, which was adopted in 1999, eliminating, the element addresses preservation of natural features, ridgeline sensitive habitats, recreational areas, and open space to be designated as a buffer. And it also protects the native oak trees, which I have 17 in front of my house. I don't think there's any need for a gate on Romero Canyon. They're an urban area. They're mostly houses. Like I said, no livestock. And then there's Hasley Hills, and it's all urban too.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Richard Landy.
Thank you, board members. My name is Richard Landy, president of Citizens for Castaic. What I'm requesting is now, not later, dual access to our public high school. Public high school meaning that everyone has access to it. Most of the population is coming from the south. Future growth is in the south, not the north. We need dual access from day one when the school opens. I'm very concerned, and if you'd like to take note, on page 447 of the PDF or DEIR pages 5.14-35 and 36, you have written exclusions on how you won't put in dual access. This is very concerning to me that by a board meeting that you could allow yourselves to not put in dual access even at a later date. I'm requesting, and the community is requesting, dual access day one. Secondarily, the Hasley Sloan site is a very viable alternative site. It should take careful consideration by the board. It meets all of these school board's objectives as stated in the draft EIR. It also meets the community's requirements on dual access and cost, greenhouse gas emissions, and just everything in the draft EIR. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Flo Lawrence.
Superintendent, Madam President, board members, staff, handsomely paid consultants, thank you for taking my comments. There were 7 unavoidable areas. I heard 4, not 7. I want to address those quickly. Visual characteristics, nighttime lighting, air quality, and construction noise. We had Dr. Paul Priest and Bob Vincent come out to our middle school and talk about opening Valencia and West Ranch high schools. Paul Priest said at the time that they started construction on Valencia that you could not see a house from the construction site. I would imagine the visual characteristics have changed in that neighborhood, and I would imagine it was pretty dark, and that the nighttime lighting has changed. So we've done this before. As far as air quality, I have 2 students. I had 2 students last year at West Ranch. It's 15 miles round trip. Because of sports and different start and end times, I would often make that trip 4 times a day. If you're going to tell me that the air quality is going to be worse because the kids are driving from Castaic, I'm going to tell you you're crazy. As far as construction noise, that, my friends, is music to my ears. This too shall pass. All right, now, as far as the dual access, I am in complete agreement with Mr. Landy. We need to have 2 points of access for the school. We need one from the north and one from the south, and we need to do it from the beginning. Build it now. Build it all. Build it right the first time. There's parts of that document that say it's environmentally preferable to have a 1,600 student school. No, we were promised a 2,600 student school. We want the whole thing. We want all the classes offered to our students. We want all the facilities. We want all the auditoriums and the fields and everything that goes with it. Build it now. Build it all. Build it right the first time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Cameron.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. I ripped myself from the mechanical arms of my dentist to come here, so I'm not in uniform, as I sometimes am. Recently, I read something absolutely compelling. In 1927, a subject dominated Southern California media. It was the wildly inappropriate location of the rustically implanted campus of UCLA. Los Angeles ended at Vermont Avenue at that time. There were scattered developments in Beverly Hills, and by the way, at that time, the hills of Beverly really resembled the lower posterior sections of a baboon. There wasn't much at all in the way of landscaping or visual mitigation or anything. You can see it in the photographs in the air. There was a racetrack at the corner of Wilshire and Santa Monica. Less than 20 years later, several things happened. One, Hart High School opened. And number two, all of those rural characteristics that massively were decried as being so bizarre around UCLA disappeared. And now, 80 some odd years later, the only difficulty with UCLA was, as large as it was then, it is not large enough today. The reason I mention that is that there will be 4,000 high school students from the Castaic area that will need to be housed, probably in 10 to 15 to 20 years maximum. You have an extraordinary opportunity to do something for students who may or may not remember who you are, may or may not express gratitude, but who will, because of a good school being available, make extraordinary contributions to the Santa Cruz Valley, to our state, and hopefully to our country and the entire world. They will not remember a long time who we are, but they'll be grateful for what you did if you do it right.
Thank you. Right on time. That is all of the requests to speak. If there are no more oral and or written comments, I will declare the public hearing closed.